The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Welcome back, everybody. This is Brian for Breaking Down Security. This week is our part two of our discussion, actually, with Andrew from the Executive Director of the FIDO Alliance. We're going to talk to him a little bit more about how FIDO and everything works. This week, we're going to discuss, as a matter of fact, the first thing we get into is IoT and talking about how IoT is just a hot mess concerning the application, authentication platforms and what have you, and how FIDO is helping out with that. You can catch part one of this 2 weeks ago. Last week was, of course, with Derek Rook when we talked about red team and blue team tactics and how to communicate better between red team and blue team and management. But I learned a lot with this series of interviews about the FIDO Alliance and what they do, how they work. They're not just a bunch of companies trying to push their own agendas, which is great to hear. And we're going to go ahead and get right into this interview. This is Andrew's response to my question about there's a website stating there'd be 15 billion devices in 2020. How is the FIDO Alliance working to help secure those? So what you'll hear as we go right into the show is our discussion and his answer to that question. So have a great week. Black Lives Matter, and we'll talk to you again soon. Yeah, one of the other things I saw was IoT, because according to your website and according to analyst website, there are 15 billion IoT devices out there, or will be very soon, and a lot of those come right out of the box insecure, super easy passwords or hard-coded passwords. The idea of the FIDO Alliance in this case is to be implemented to make sure that we're not being eavesdrop on our nanny cams or what have you. How easy is it to utilize this in an IoT environment, considering there's a number of different platforms for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually just initiated some new work. I'm actually just trying to pull something up here to speak through this. Some new work in IoT, and you hit the problem statement on the head.
Right.
Simply put, I think we need to take the password out of IoT. Right. That would like passwords on the web. This would solve so many problems. Right. Getting rid of the password, and there's simple things that vendors can do to stop hard coding. And I think hard coding passwords with their devices, get away from admin, stuff like that. And those are things that vendors need to do. And I think hopefully they are doing. But when we're talking about 18 billion devices, 18 billion different deployment scenarios, it's important to actually have new standards that vendors can point to in building their devices and onboarding devices. So a couple notes on FIDO and IoT. So for any sort of, user to cloud authentication use case or like a home automation use case, you can actually deploy FIDO now, right? Nice. So you can require, a second factor using FIDO specifications. We've seen people actually use the FIDO specs and do like a silent server, if you will, inside a device where you need to do local FIDO authentication. So you can do that today. And that's another way of getting rid of, shared default passwords. The other work that FIDO is looking at is, to kind of bring the FIDO user authentication paradigm to IoT. And this is the new work that we're doing. It's a new work that we're standardizing, looking at better ways, basically, of onboarding devices onto a network. Right. So how can we protect those networks? How can we protect those devices? How can we make it easier and safer and faster? You think about, like, say, you're rolling out a bunch of smart meters, in a city or on a street. Right. If you can securely onboard those smart meters in a matter of seconds rather than a matter of minutes, think about the cost savings and time savings associated with that. So that's the new work that we're just embarking upon. Working on the first set of specifications right now to allow for safer IoT deployments at scale. And the companies leading that are we haven't talked much about who comprises the FIDO membership, but the groups leading this effort are companies like Intel and Qualcomm, and kind of chipset guys, but also the internet providers. So Google, Amazon, and companies like that are all part of FIDO's membership and also helping drive these specifications.
Nice. Yeah, I upgraded my Wi-Fi recently, and I started using the Google Nest Wi-Fi stuff, and I found it quite interesting that I didn't need a password to log in. I just, I installed the Google Nest app on my phone, and then it was like, you power this on, and there's a little code on the AP that you scan with that, and it automatically registers it to your account, and it really gives you, a dashboard of what's going on in your environment. This is not an advertisement for this, but it was just nice to not have to type in a password or, to go, typical Wi-Fi routers or whatever that you hook up. You go to 192.168.0.1 and it's like, oh yeah, there's no password. You can just log right in. And I'm like, what if I don't take the time to do that, or time and effort to do that? And I just decide, well, it works. I plugged it into my network and it, does fine or whatever. It's interesting how we're moving that around, where we go from no password to requiring a password, or it doesn't work until there's a password, to you don't even need a password. You just need to, verify that it's a thing. We're definitely moving that ball down the road, and it was so simple I could do it. So obviously, folks should be able to get to that point where they can do that. So yeah, that was definitely an IoT device that I have implemented in my house, that I didn't feel like I just left it open to World plus Dog to be able to access.
Yeah. No, I had a similar experience. I was recently did a home renovation, so I was out of the house for a while. Okay. And I was living in an apartment, and I was trying to log into my internet provider, right? So I went to the admin screen, but I didn't realize I was actually logged on to my landlord who lived below me. I was logged on to their network and actually inadvertently logged into their network rather than my own. So it's even simple, like non-nefarious mistakes can happen when you're dealing with passwords. And so, I think it's very important as we're talking about the scale of these devices to protect them and protect people from themselves, really.
Right. So one last thing, at least for me, before we go, there's a lot of information on the website about how to install this for developers. It looks like you've tried to add as much complexity, but also to make it as widely available as possible. So there's a FIDOalliance.org/developers talking about registration APIs. There's UAF_operation, which is an API specification defining Android intent and iOS callback scheme. So you've there's there are REST calls, there's REST APIs. You've got JSON messages. There's unless you're using some other kind of, platform, and I'm sure that they have implementations on their side, there's, it doesn't seem like that there's a huge level of effort to install yet another API if you are using this or you want to use this in your environment. So the ease of use appears to be there for a lot of organizations.
It is. I mean, and there's a lot of work to be done here, and there's exciting work that we're going to be doing with developers. Going back to FIDO's goal, and so I'm glad you find those resources to be helpful. It's an area of our site we're actually looking to improve. But let's talk about developers at kind of a broader level. FIDO's goal is to get adoption. That's what we're aiming to do, is get people using this. And to get adoption for new technology, you have to do a couple of things. One, you have to build the specifications. We've done that, right? Secondly, and perhaps most important, is getting the technology in people's hands. Right, the endpoints, if you will, and we did that last year. Through the FIDO 2 rollout and the certification of Android and Windows, and also WebAuthn, taking root in every major browser. So all of a sudden, in 2019, we had 2 billion or something like that new addressable devices that can access FIDO authentication. The two other elements, I think, to drive adoption. One is building consumer aware and demand, right? So start building some pull. And we talked a little bit about the consumer logos and marks that we'll be introducing very soon. Mm-hmm. But perhaps, the most important ingredient or a critical ingredient is building this stuff and helping developers actually add FIDO into their sites and their services. Right. And so, we have information here, but on the site, what's really interesting, what's really cool about WebAuthn is that for the first time, there's now kind of a publicly available JavaScript API. It's relatively easy to use that developers can use to add better authentication into their website or their web service. And, I'm not a developer, but, I engage with a lot. And I think that developers tend to get a little squeamy around a couple of things. Around payments, for example, they don't really want to get into that too much. And security is another one, right? And so a lot of sites, that's why so many sites default to weak security, because it's there and it's easy enough to do, right? And so we want to make it just as easy for developers to add FIDO authentication to their sites as it is to do password-based or SMS OTP-based authentication. Mm-hmm. And so, WebAuthn enables this. There's a lot of libraries out there in the kind of public domain, developer libraries that you can use in your favorite language, your favorite framework, whatever you choose, that can allow developers to very quickly add FIDO to their sites and their services. So I think that's an area that we'll be focused on more and more this year and next year, is helping empower these developers to kind of do better security on their sites.
Right on.
And that, again, going back to the systematic approach of driving adoption of FIDO, I think that's kind of the last piece in the puzzle to really start seeing this thing take off at scale.
Yeah. So I found one, WebAuthn, all one word, .io. There's various links there to Go, Java, .NET, JavaScript, Python, Ruby. There's even a Chrome extension. I'm assuming if you're running on the new Nightly or the new Edge browser, that Chrome extension will probably work inside of your Chrome Edge version as well. So if you're a Windows only shop and you have to use Microsoft Edge, that should work as well as a plugin. Mm-hmm. Mr. Betcher,
there's a good list. There's a guy on our team named Yuri Ackerman has a site called WebAuthn, GitHub site called WebAuthn Awesome. It's a list of resources. And that's another good resource. And on his site, he actually lists the libraries that are what he calls FIDO conformant. So we have a self-serve conformance tool, mm-hmm. And that includes like the Go library, there's a Ruby library, .NET library. The importance of knowing these things are conformant means that whatever you spit out of this, when you're done, the output of your library will interoperate with FIDO servers, FIDO authenticators, and things like that.
Right.
So that's another resource for people to check out.
Yep, that link's in our show notes. I found several. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. Yeah, I guess it's important. It's good for developers to want to implement this, but they need to have some either test cases or some way to verify that they're actually conformant or certified against various tools. Not everybody can grab a key or a YubiKey or whatever and be able to test that way. So having the ability to have a checklist or something that is easily test against is helpful. So
yeah, I'd also encourage people to most of the vendors in FIDO have developer programs, right? So you mentioned Yubico, Microsoft, Mozilla. These are all people who have active developer programs underway to help developers with their FIDO implementations.
Right. Yep. They also have numerous SDKs on that awesome WebAuthn website. So, and tutorials, introduction to the WebAuthn API. So, this would, you could almost make this a selling point. It's like, we're, now new and improved. You don't even need a password to log in. All you need is, to be able to register your device. You could, tout the easy to use ness of it instead of, no longer have to remember a password. I can definitely see this being used as a selling point for a product in this case.
And you hit on a really important point there. So, I've talked to a lot of companies that are deploying FIDO, and it's ease of use. It's actually their lead interest.
Right.
So security, they love the security aspect, of course, But ease of use is really important, right? So they do want to message this to their consumers that now it's easier to log in, right? No one wants to say now it's safer to log in because that implies, well, what was it before?
Mm-hmm.
But the ease of use is really important, right? So Intuit, for example, we did a case study with them. They brought down their rejected authentication rate by, I think, 3% or 4%, which is really meaningful, right?
Nice.
And so they now have like 99% successful logins, using FIDO authentication. So the more people who can log into your site and your service means the more people are going to do business with you. There's all sorts of data out there about abandoned shopping carts due to passwords. Half of the shopping cart abandonments are due to password issues. People don't know their password. It stops the impulse buy. So not only is it better for consumers, but it's better for business to allow people to log on easier. So I think the ease of use is really a critical aspect of what we're trying to do. In fact, FIDO's tagline is simpler, stronger authentication. Mm-hmm. And so much focus, all of our discussion today was on the stronger piece, but the simpler piece is really, important. That's why I think we'll see a lot more adoption and deployments moving forward.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that the password lockers and 1Passwords and the Dashlanes of the world should be scared of FIDO because it's going to upset their business case.
No, not necessarily. I mean, they support FIDO as well, and I think, look, we're going to go passwordless overnight now. It's a journey to get there, and most of those password the password managers support FIDO as well, right? So you can use like a second factor to log into those, or you certainly should do. Mm-hmm. These companies are providing a valuable service, and they'll continue to do so for some time. And then so we're not apt to scare those companies. I think there's a path to going passwordless. That'll take a couple of years, but our hope is that in the next 5 years or so, that the vast majority of consumer services will have a passwordless option, a passwordless login option, and we do believe that most of those will be using FIDO. But there's legacy passwords. There's the passwords might still persist beyond that for some time, but the passwordless experience will be introduced in the next 5 years. The big step, beyond that, that will be invisible to the user, is actually getting the passwords off the server in favor of public keys. Right. And that's a big step. We see companies like NTT DOCOMO, the mobile operator in Japan. They actually give users the option to not have a password at all. You can delete your password. So your legacy users getting passwords out of their hands. Now, the cool thing is, with all this technology in place, you can start onboarding users without passwords. Right. So they never have a password. Right. So Aetna is doing work with that using FIDO as well. So you're onboarded through other mechanisms, you're verified through other mechanisms, but you never have a password, right? So you only have a public key. So I think that's, the moving forward future is super exciting, because if you don't ever have a password, there's nothing to be stolen.
Right. Yeah, that does make sense. And I was being facetious about the password lockers and stuff. You're always going to have an environment where you must have a password, whether you've got this old box that's still running Windows XP, or certain OSs or systems. Mainframe systems probably may not run two-factor, or you may have a need for a really long password because there's no good way of implementing a second factor in any way, shape, or form, because there's always that one box that you can't touch or play with. So. I think for the vast majority of people who are using web apps, using APIs, using IoT, that the removal of a password is probably going to be better in the long run. We won't see Troy Hunt's website getting any more password breaches, because ideally there won't be any more password breaches. So when we have a password breach, or let's say somebody does get into somebody's website. There won't be hashes to grab. There won't be, what would a world post password look like in that case? I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here, but
a good one, a nice one. So they're public keys, right? So I mean, by definition, they're public. There's nothing. There's no material value to that. You can't reverse engineer the public key to get to the private key or anything like that. So there's really no material value to a public key. So hackers will, have to figure out another way to do their work. And that's why this truly is a cycle, right? And I don't know if you guys have covered credential stuffing, in previous podcasts. But credential theft and credential stuffing is quietly a massive problem, right? And upwards of like 90% of attempted logins to e-commerce sites are fake logins using stuffed stolen credentials.
Right.
Think about the cost associated with that, and they have around a 2% up to a 2% success rate. So not only is it an infrastructure cost and a manpower cost, but there's real fraud costs associated with this as well. So we think the only way to stop the cycle is to break the cycle entirely and get rid of the credentials. And it'll take a while to get there, but once there's nothing to steal and nothing to resell and nothing to stuff, that whole cycle starts to go away. And that's really what we're trying to do. Again, so FIDO has found is to stop the data breach cycle. And this is, passwords are at the core of this cycle.
Right. Yep. Mr. Betcher, do you have any other questions?
Not a question, but I think it's really good that what you touched on earlier, Andrew, was that we as security professionals think of, well, we need to get better at security first. That's our first thought. But we also need to focus on the business and what's best for the business. And I think that getting not only better security, but an easier password solution for customers to draw them into the business is a win-win. So I think if we bring this up, if we have these ideas and we believe we can implement this to management, I think they could be convinced to implement better security with the benefit of actually drawing in more customers or having a better user experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I mentioned before that the new site we have, loginwithfido.com. There's two tabs to it. One's consumer, one's called service provider. And that is targeted at the discussion you're talking about, right? So again, it's very high level language, but this is something that if you need to go into management and talk about, well, why do I do this? And those are the messages we have there.
Right.
And we think that's a very important. I hear this from like the service providers inside of FIDO Alliance is that, hey, look, I need help selling this internally. Like I know it makes sense, but how do I talk to our C-suite about this? And this is what we're trying to do: is help people talk to their C-suite about the business benefits of FIDO in addition to the security benefits.
Right. And, depending on your work environment, you may find that you would want to implement this for high-risk people in your environment before someone else. So, you've got a developer with access to code, or, you've got people who have access to sensitive data, HR folks. You may want to implement this in your own environment internally to, further shore that up. Or, your CEO is able to send money, out, and, his password is, go Steelers or whatever. And having a passwordless requirement where he has to, I need to see your face before I can do use a fingerprint before I make a wire transfer or something, can make it immeasurably harder for a bad guy to be able to do a money transfer or a wire fraud or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in general, and we've seen a lot of companies implement internally first. So anyone who's listening to this who wants to get started, we definitely recommend, as with any technology, probably an internal pilot.
Right.
So you do some piloting, but I think you find some internal use cases where you actually need it.
Right.
Protecting sensitive resources, find a team that should be protecting themselves. The C-suite's a good example. They're all targets of spear phishing. They should all be using, if they're G Suite companies, they should be using advanced protection. If they're Windows companies, they should be using Windows Hello. These are all things that are out there that support FIDO today. But, doing internal pilots is a great way to get started.
Right. Oh, okay. So one other question I've gotten, and I think we can probably end it here. So we're talking about keys, we're talking about certs, we're talking about, provisioning and registering people. How easy, and I guess this would depend on the implementation, would it be to do things like revocation? So let's say I lose my device. I lose my phone. Whoops, it's in the lake or something like that. How easy is it to revoke your current key and gain access back to the system? Is it just dependent on the complexity of the system being implemented, or is there an easy way for you to recoverkey.fido.org or something to be able to get back into all of those passwordless systems that you've now established.
Yep. So you hit on the biggest challenge of FIDO, frankly, in this whole model is account recovery.
Sorry.
Which is fine. This is great open discussion we have inside the Alliance, right? So what's the best means for account recovery? So, a couple of best practices. One, people should have two keys. So Yubico says this, and any key vendor says this. Google, for example, every Google employee uses FIDO security keys, and they're given two or more. So you should always have a backup key to help the account recovery process, help bootstrap your account recovery. Most services that support FIDO today allow you to delete the key and sort of to revoke that key from those services. And so that you do need to go to the service where you're enrolled to replace that key with a new key, or to delete that old key and deregister that key. And so that's one way of doing it. So we're looking at it, depending on the use case, there's different ways to manage account recovery. But generally, when you get a new device, you need to re-enroll that device to each service. Okay. And so this is a big focus area, though. So we're looking at some new approaches. The good news and bad news of FIDO is that we have really strong security and strong security principles that present some challenges in enrolling new devices. And so we're working on new mechanisms that will make this process easier in the future.
Yeah.
Good news though, say you drop your security key, your YubiKey on the ground. No one can really do anything with that other than use it for themselves, right? I mean, so I wouldn't know it's yours. I'd still need to, if it's a second factor use case, I'd still need to know your first factor. So it doesn't really have much utility from a security standpoint, other than someone gets a new piece of $20 to $50 piece of hardware.
Right. And I've actually worked at companies where you can lock those keys. So let's say I drop it, I can't wipe whatever memory is in it and then reprovision it to use somewhere else. So if somebody steals it thinking, oh cool, I've got a YubiKey or whatever, there are mechanisms in place to lock those down where they can only be used in one place or not used at all elsewhere. So, yeah.
And then typically in a FIDO 2 scenario, they require a PIN also, so
right.
You still need a PIN to log in addition to the key. There's added protections built in.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Mr. Betcher, any last thoughts? Any questions, suggestions, anything?
Nope. That was my last thought.
Right on. Okay. So I've also put in the show notes because, obviously, big organization like this, you must have some events or what have you going on. So if you go to fidoalliance.org/events, there's webinars coming up. Looks like there is a November event that may or may not be virtual, depending on how the world goes. And looks like you have monthly webinars talking about various things. So if anybody's interested in that kind of outreach or that kind of education, that's available. And I assume that a lot of that is still vendor agnostic, so you're not trying to sell a specific vendor or anything like that.
It's all vendor agnostic. So we support our vendors, and I'll do if vendors have webinars, I'll speak on their webinars. So everything we do is it's all use case driven, and education driven. So we're not pushing vendors at all in these things. Now, you mentioned Authenticate, and that's our public conference. It was initially scheduled for early June. We've pushed it back to November. Our hope is indeed that we can have this conference. It stands to be really cool. Yeah. We typically, so as a membership, we meet we used to meet 3 times a year, once in Asia, once in Europe, once in North America. And then before that, we'd have a public seminar. And we found that, these one-day events were wildly popular. We'd get hundreds of people attending these things. And so what we've done is we've kind of expanded that paradigm with Authenticate to have a 2-day public conference, with sponsors, with vendors, but 2 full days of content. And we were super excited about this event. We had, I think 40 something talks, maybe, a keynote by Whit Diffie, really cool content scheduled. And our hope was that we can carry it on in person. If not, we'll find a way to do it virtually. But anyone who's interested in authentication, should follow that site and stay tuned and try to attend in person. And if it is virtual, be sure to attend virtually, because it covers all aspects of authentication and only authentication.
Nice. Okay. All right. Well, so if anybody wanted to move, into this, or they have any questions, is there a good way to contact you or your organization to ask additional questions? Or is there anybody, is there a forum or a mailing list they could join that might help them if they're, have further questions past the podcast?
Yeah. So you can contact me, Andrew at FIDOalliance.org. We have an info at FIDOalliance.org, which contacts everybody. But I'm happy to hear from people. There is a public FIDO dev forum for developers. I'm going to put it's a Google group, and then put the link into your show notes as well.
Cool.
I assume you share these things.
Yep.
So that's there. I also put in, I encourage people to visit the website. We have resources there. We have case studies there, webinars, archives, recordings. Again, our goal as an organization is to educate the market so people use better authentication. So if anything's missing, likewise, please let us know, because we aim to address any questions that people may have about deploying better authentication.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, Andrew, thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead. You can drop off if you'd like, but we're just going to do the end of our show here. And you're always welcome to come back. I mean, we've just scratched the surface on this, and I'm sure that there are, multiple different, topics that we haven't even broached that we probably should. So, feel free to hit us up again.
Once our IoT stuff progresses, let's regroup on that, and I'll bring in some of our IoT leads to talk about what FIDO's doing in IoT, because I think that would be really interesting.
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah, because everybody's trying to get in the IoT space. So, doing it right is going to be important. So,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
All right, thanks, Andrew.
Gentlemen, thank you both.
All right.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
So, Mr. Betcher, tell us, we talked about the incident response podcast in the first last week. So what topics were discussed in the last two, and what's coming up in the upcoming episode of Incident Response Podcast?
Well, the last two, we had some guests to talk about various things, right? And those were recorded quite a while ago. So these are, they were archived and we released them recently.
Okay.
And the one we had talking about yesterday was basically Incident Response 101. I mean, how you need to get set up. So it's a good place to start.
Sweet.
Right? If you, if you're interested in it, or if you're doing it and you want to rehash the basics of it. So,
right. Yeah. That's a great evergreen topic. Everybody's going to, depending on which org you're in, if you don't have an incident response team, it's going to be something hopefully that you could look at 10 years down the line, and it would still be applicable to your org. Exactly. So that's awesome. So Hacker Hurricane on Twitter, he'll have links out to that. I believe there is a link to their website, and you have an incident response tool that you use that you're developing, and maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's called LogMD. I'm sure listeners have heard of it before.
Right.
But it's something that we came up with to help us not only prepare for, but also help us respond to attacks.
Right.
If you want to audit your systems to see if it's doing the right things for free, you can download the free version and audit your system and see what you may be lacking on your endpoints.
Right on.
It is for Windows, and it'll tell you, hey, set these things. It's totally free. It comes with Windows. It's not going to hose your system. It's all built in by default. Windows really doesn't do much as far as security for incident response, but if you turn these things on, you're going to get a lot, and you're going to benefit from it if something were to happen.
Right. So it creates detective controls and helps on the back end preventative wise. So it helps detect and reduce the amount of damage potentially that could happen by being a detective control. So they don't pay us to do that, but it's a good tool for blue teamers, and they're not a sponsor yet, but once they start making fat bank, we'll pass the plate in some cases. But cool. So log-md.com, of course, there. And if people were interested in talking about the Incident Response Podcast or LogMD, how would they find you?
Yeah, they could go to the website log-md.com, and I'm also on Twitter at Betcherpwned, BOETTCHERPWNED.
Fantastic. All right, so you can find our show notes. We put a lot of links in the podcast, both last week and this week. You can find all of the show notes on our website, breakingsecurity.com, BRAKEING security.com. We have an RSS feed, so any of your favorite podcatchers will be able to incorporate that and make it work. Miss Berlin, we always like having her on the show. She's spending time with her kids and such, and we believe family is very important and above the podcast here. So you can find her on Twitter at InfoSystir, INFOSYSTIR. She's also running the Mental Health Hackers, which is a nonprofit to shine a light on mental health issues in the InfoSec community. You can find that at Hackers Health on Twitter. She's also doing a tabletop defense and detection tabletops. It's a role-playing game type system. When we get back in the meat space, and actually I think it probably works fairly well online too, but if you're interested in that, you can hit her up on Twitter or check that out. So if you're a blue team, you can potentially use that in your own environment. So go check that out. So you can follow me on Twitter at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE, and you can send us email at bds.podcast@gmail.com, or our Twitter is at Brakesec, BRAKESEC. If you're interested in our Slack, we still have a book club going on. I think we're on chapter 10. I think we're roughly halfway through as of the 1st of June here. So if you're interested in joining our book club, which happens on a weekly basis, we have a EMEA and APAC version, but we also have a US version as well, which happens on Monday nights, I believe. You can join us, get a Slack invite, send us a DM on Twitter or bds.podcast@gmail.com. And you can join us. We're doing AWS pen testing. It's a packed publishing book, so you can join us to do that. Thank you to our Patreon supporters. Their money and time and tip jar helps offset costs, Zoom fees, Libsyn hosting, domain purchase and renewal, equipment upgrades, and just time and effort of building the community we have. So TeePublic website. We have stickers, t-shirts, coffee mugs, anything you'd want to put our logo on and show support for the show. We get a little bit of a kickback on that as well. If you're interested in doing that, you can go to teepublic.com/user/BDS podcast. And I just saw the other day where I was checking iTunes and Google Play Store, because Google Play apparently is not putting all of our episodes on their feed, even though iTunes has no problem with it. But we have like a 4.8 rating on iTunes out of 5. How does that happen?
I don't know.
It's obviously Mr. Betcher and Miss Berlin's stellar personalities. But yeah, we have really great ratings, and that helps us get more exposure. So if you are listening to this show and you're like, hey, thanks for putting the FIDO Alliance folks on to talk about the issues and implementation, leave us some feedback on your favorite platform. That way we can get some more exposure, and that helps us out. It's word of mouth it's worth more than gold. It's worth more than the tip jars, sometimes in terms of that. And tell your friends, because, if you're out doing a walk or something and you need CPEs for your CISP or your CISA, podcasts count towards that. So 1 hour podcast is 1 CPE. So Mr. Betcher, you need your CPEs, right? So, oh wait, how does that work for you?
I do.
How does that work for you? I think you could prep for the podcast. You get a couple hours of prep time, I think, I think that's how it works for CISP. So I need to figure out how to do that, because I'm sure I have about 800 hours of this stuff. So anyway, I don't have anything else. Mr. Betcher, anything left from you?
Nope.
Okay.
Stay safe.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that was it for Bringing Down Security this week. Be safe. Be well. Be kind to one another. Take care of yourself because you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. All right. Excellent.
All right.
But I'm glad y'all are doing the incident response podcast again. I keep getting people asking me about it, and there's definitely not enough incident response discussion out there, and I would love to do more of it on here, but we only have so many times and so many people, and so I'm glad y'all are doing that, and I hope it start a more regular thing. So was it just you two riffing, or was it did you have a person?
Yeah, it was
on?
Just us two.
Oh, that's cool.
That time.
Well, you guys got plenty of experience. You can, between yourselves. Did you see that post in Slack where apparently since like June of last year, there's been a Wireshark-like application in Windows that does full packet captures?
Built into Windows 10 or?
Yeah, built into Windows 10.
I have not seen that.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it. I thought I put it up in the Blue Team channel. Let me see. Scroll.
Let me do a search.
Yeah, you can run it via the command line. So let's see. Let's see. Hidden rules. Bleeping computer. Windows terminal. DOS path magic tricks.
Wireshark may be in the App Store.
There it is. Windows 10 quietly got a built-in network sniffer. Here's how to use. It's 16th of May. Here, I'll put it in our chat.
What's it called?
It was actually added in the November 2018 update, so it's actually been there for almost 2 years.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. I don't know if there's anything you can do with it, but without having to install Wireshark, if it's available, it is called packet sniffer or network sniffer. It's called packetmon, pktmon.exe. Monitor internal packet propagation and packet drop reports. It's similar to NetSH trace. There you go.
pktmon.
Yep. .exe.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Apparently it's been in there since August. It'll log to the ETW, so your Windows event whatever. So it would be cool as if they had something other than ETL or ETW for the packet trace, but it is what it is. And I don't know if it does promiscuous mode or anything like that, but it might be worth a look if you could set up some kind of rule set that would allow you to watch for various things in there.
Cool.
Yeah.
I did not know this.
Oh, there you go.